Welcome. This is presentation number 18 in our series Retrieving Romans. For my students at Loma Linda University, for whom this series is made especially, and they are the reason why we are doing it, this is presentation number 14. But I hope to complete the series, and when we do that and we have preserved most of the narrative of Romans, we should have about 18 presentations. So at some point I might redo this one, but this is where we are now at the end of Romans, and we are retrieving hope. We are even retrieving ecological hope, and that's compatible with the text of Romans and compatible with the goal we have set for our course to see what ecological message there is also in this book. So in chapter 15, and we have covered this text already in my class, but and this is Paul quoting Isaiah, So we have our letter writer here in Rembrandt's representation, Apostle Paul, and we have him signing off the letter toward the end of the letter here in Romans 15, and he quotes Isaiah. And again, Isaiah says, "The root of Jesse shall come, the one who rises to rule the Gentiles. In him the Gentiles shall hope." So we have Isaiah teaming up with Paul. We said they are like Simon and Garfunkel, two voices together singing exquisite harmony. And we see that the inclusion of the Gentile is an Old Testament vision. It's not something new that Paul suddenly discovered. He is not the one who gets us started, that God wants to include everyone. And we started Romans 1 by seeing that, or hearing that there is an allusion or a quotation from Habakkuk. "The righteous shall live by my faithfulness." That was from Habakkuk. And when we went to Habakkuk, we saw that God speaks to Habakkuk, who feels that God is absent. And God tells him that something will happen. He says, wait for him. He will surely come. He will not delay. So he creates an expectation that something is to happen. And then, like bookends, we see Isaiah quoted by Paul as the end of the letter. "A shoot shall come out from in Isaiah, the text that we are looking at. "A shoot shall come out from the stump of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of his roots." So Habakkuk tells us to wait for something to happen. Something shall happen. He will surely come. And Isaiah also says something will come. So what are we going to wait for? What is the expectation created? Are we waiting for justification? It's not excluded, but it isn't the best word for what we are led to expect. Should we wait for participation? That's the new perspective on Paul. Justification was the old perspective. The new perspective is participation. We should wait for that too, but that is not the best word for what we are expecting. What is it then? Wait for revelation. That covers it much better. Wait for him. He will surely come as a revealer. And wait for him. He will also come as a revealer. And the message of revelation is then echoing in Romans, and is a message in Romans that has been muted in interpretations. We have our statement here, and then that's Romans We don't need to read it again. And then we have Isaiah, and it will happen on that day, toward the root of Jesse, which stands there like a signal to the nations. The nations will all turn inquisitively, and his resting place shall be glorious. And our task now is to walk through that passage in Isaiah that Paul is referring to, or actually quoting in Romans. So we're going to read in some detail Isaiah 11, 1 to 10. And I have said earlier in my course that that passage is hugely influential on the New Testament. It cannot be overestimated. So we're reading now Isaiah chapter 11, first 2 verses. A shoot will come forth from the stump of Jesse, and a sprig will bear fruit from his roots. And the Spirit of Yahweh will rest upon him, Spirit of wisdom and insight, Spirit of foresight and strength, Spirit of knowledge and awe of Yahweh. So the person who will come here comes from unpromising roots. There is just a stump left. It is almost like the tree has died. And suddenly from this almost or nearly dead tree stump, some life springs up. And the qualities of this person is exceptional. Spirit of wisdom and insight, Spirit of foresight and strength, Spirit of knowledge and awe of Yahweh. So, just to summarize a few points, there is hope rising from apparent hopelessness. And there is a promise of success. The sprig will bear fruit. It is not going to be in vain. And then he is from the tribe of David or Jesse, so he is human. But he is more than human because he has a certain relation to the divine. So the Spirit here creates new possibilities. So this figure straddles human realm and God's realm. So he is more than a human being. That's all we need to say now. And just to put it in a picture here with a nice, the text is here and here is the stump and something is sprouting from it. It was nearly dead, but here there is life. And then we read on verses 3 and 4. He will have awe of Yahweh. And I have tweaked this translation. This verse here is very difficult to translate. The language is very evocative, but it's not that easy to turn it into English. It says something about a person's olfactory sense, the sense of smell. Actually, this verse will deal with many of our senses: vision, touch, speech, and smell and hearing. All those senses are described, and they are properties, they are qualities in the person who comes as a revealer. So here is the translation. He will have awe of Yahweh as though it is in his nose. Smell. What's that? That's one of our strangest sensations. And the olfactory nerve is a huge nerve that grows out of our brains. It is an extension of our brains. It's a cranial nerve. And it's very big. And I smell something here. This expression in Isaiah means that this person has a strong affinity for the things of God. He is drawn to it. There is a certain fragrance that attracts him and appeals to his sense of smell, as it were. He does not judge according to appearances. By the way, I had meant to put this here. So here we did the nose. And then we will look at appearances. So that is the eye. He does not judge according to appearances. He has exquisite eyesight. He sees things as they really are. It's not by appearances. And then we let go of that one. And then, or decide simply on the basis of rumor. All right, he even has a better sense of hearing than the average person. Nose, eyes, and hearing that are extraordinary. And then he does not decide, he does not judge on the basis of rumor, rather with rightful means. He helps the lowly to get justice and will intervene with equity for the poor in the land. And then the last one, that's the speech one. Let's see here. And he strikes the violent ones with the staff of his mouth and kills the malicious one with the breath of his lips. I will let that stand as a metaphor, not just for speech, but for revelation. He's a revealing person. He sets things right and reveals what is right. So, verse 5, still describing this figure that will come and that we are led to expect in Isaiah. And righteousness or right-making is the girdle of his hips, and faithfulness the loincloth of his loins. And I have spent some time, some effort on emphasizing the theme of faithfulness in Romans. How Romans builds up that theme by recourse to Old Testament texts. And here you have it again, the element of right-making through the faithfulness of God, or the faithfulness of God in Jesus. That's what we are looking at. And then he will spell out the consequences. What happens when the revelation has run its course? What will the world be like then? And this passage is often relegated to Sabbath school or Sunday school or a text for children. But it is a text for adults as well, and not just for children. But it is a children's paradise for sure. The wolf will be a visitor of the lamb, and the leopard will lie down with the kid. Then the calf and the young lion will get fattened together, and a little lad will lead them. Then the cow and the bear will be friends with one another, and their young one will lie down with one another. So here we have seen where the predatory animal and the domestic animal, suddenly the adversarial relationship between those animals are over. And not only does he pair a predatory animal, wild animal, with a domestic animal, but he pairs the adult of the predatory animal with the baby or the child of the domestic animal. So he makes the sort of imbalance of the strong and the vulnerable even stronger. So we see here, and this text has, of course, won many artists to draw it. I have to say, though, that this text, you find it in modern art and you find it in religious art. You don't find it very much in classical art, because the classical art is simply, maybe they thought this is too good to be true. Maybe you just can't do it. So if I look for pictures in classical art here, there isn't much, but we do have something here. And while I was looking for illustrations, this book came out and I couldn't resist putting it here. Someone noticed that our text says that a little lad will tend them, or a little lad will lead them. And someone has used this for school integration to overcome racism, that integration of schools in some ways served as a means to overcome these entrenched hostilities and divisions in our society, in American society. It's quite cute to use the text that way. The more literal way of reading it, of course, is this, that there is paradise regained, as it were, and the child is now having a good time and feeling totally safe with these animals, domestic and wild animals. Why in the world would the prophet do this? You know, what is it? What is in his mind of the world to come, except to say that's how it was at some point. This is paradise regained. That these adversarial relationships were not intended. God did not intend predation, human predation on animals or animal predation of any kind. One more verse like it. Then the lion will become a vegetarian. Well, it doesn't say that. The lion will eat chopped straw like the cow, you know. I have to go out and feed my lion, you know. You feed it just like you feed the cows. And the suckling will play near the hole of a viper. So here is the baby playing where there is a snake, you know. So that is also the scariest sight you can imagine. Is not scary anymore. And toward a young viper, a weaned child will stretch out his hand. That's a kind of reflex in children. You want to touch everything. You want to touch the stove. Don't touch the stove. You want to touch this and that. You want to touch the snake. And you can tell the child, go ahead, touch the snake. That's what you are seeing here in this, in what some people call ecotopia. So again, I will in some ways apologize for these illustrations because maybe they seem a little kitschy. But the artist is onto something. He or she is set up to doing this because of the text we are reading. But a classical artists don't do it. But here you see it, the snake and the child. So I need to do this. So I have now, you might think that I advanced, that I didn't do it right, but I'm repeating this child and this slide and this illustration, the same text, and this one, because I want to contrast something. So the fact that there is an ecological vision here, the fact that the Bible takes an interest in how things will be between humans and animals, and how things will be among animals, it is quite impossible not to pause and ponder the relationship we have in our world today for animals, their condition, factory farming, up to 100,000 heads of cattle in one feedlot in California or some other state. It is simply it's another planet compared to what the Bible envisions. And sure enough, it does talk about the calf, and it does talk about the cow here. And there is help on the way, as it were. And again, it doesn't talk about chicken, but when you see the relationships between human beings and animals in this world, the relationship of predation and the pain inflicted on non-human creatures, we read this text and we think, well, it's a different world. It's something else is going to happen. And I have one more. Same thing. It doesn't say anything about pigs in the text. It mentions several other animals, sheep and goats and so on, but we get the idea. And the idea we do get is that something is wrong in this world. It's ecologically wrong, and ethically wrong, and wrong in so many ways. and the Bible takes an interest in it. And in one of the most prestigious texts in the Old Testament, it makes this a topic. And Paul, in his letter, echoes or quotes this passage that we have read now in some detail in Isaiah. So there was a book published in 2017 that was the anniversary, the 500th anniversary of the Protestant Reformation. So since 500 years after Luther's time, and Luther is history's most influential reader of the letter to the Romans. We have said in this course that some things Luther doesn't get it. But, and I think that would apply to what this person is saying. His name is Alec Ryrie, and he is a church historian, very competent church historian, and he wrote this book about Protestantism, the radicals who made the modern world. And then he says in this book that Protestantism in Europe and to some extent in the US, maybe not so much in other countries, South America, Africa, but in some countries, Protestantism is running out of gas. Protestantism is a kind of like an animal with a broken back. It just doesn't seem to have the resilience. It just doesn't seem to speak to the need, the situation of our time. And he asks toward the end of his book, because he says, well, Protestants have had a tendency to reinvent themselves. They decline and then they come back stronger. So he asks here, what new causes will animate and divide the next generation of Protestants? That's his question. I challenge you to know what his answer will be. I don't think you can guess it. I certainly couldn't guess it when I read this, so I was pretty taken aback. My guess is that some Protestants will rediscover the spiritual importance of food. It's an ecological message. It's a broader message, more inclusive message. And just to sample the contrast, the Protestant sort of key doctrine is the message of justification by faith, drawn from Romans. Well, it's still a good message, even though I have said that Paul speaks about participation and he speaks about revelation. But here, kind of modest, the kind of mundane, that Protestants will discover the spiritual significance of food. It may be justified on health grounds, as a way of honoring the bodies God gave us. It may be justified with reference to the Old Testament dietary laws, for which some Protestants have always hankered, and that could apply to the faith community I belong to, I suppose. It may be justified on the grounds of the environmental damage or the use of scarce food resources that are associated with animal husbandry. He could not say that unless he had thought about it quite a bit and kind of invested in that prospect. It may be justified on animal-centered grounds, whether the specific cruelties of industrialized farming or the wider intuition and intuition of consuming that consuming fellow creatures is wrong. It will also be opposed, of course, both on classic grounds of Christian freedom and also, of course, because many people like eating meat. Well, it's kind of amazing that someone should be thinking as a Protestant, writing a history of Protestantism and making such a prediction. Who knows what lies ahead? We, in this class, have been reading Romans also to retrieve its ecological message. We are, as it were, in step with this kind of vision for the future, if I may say so. Okay. Back to the text in Isaiah that echoes in Romans. revelation and a world set right. And this, I think, is Marc Chagall's depiction of Isaiah. I think he meant that to be Isaiah. No one shall hurt or destroy upon my entire holy mountain, for the land will be full of the knowledge of Yahweh as waters cover the sea. That is what Isaiah is saying in the closing of that passage. And here we have a similarly sounding passage at the end of Isaiah, chapter 65. Here we're in chapter 11. And here we are in the ending of Isaiah, and you see how similar it is. The wolf and the lamb shall feed together, the lion shall eat straw like the ox. And then he adds another sentence that isn't in Isaiah 11. But the serpent, its food shall be dust. And then he repeats, they shall not hurt or destroy in all my holy mountain, says the Lord. And I just wanted to highlight that. The serpent, its food shall be dust. The serpent has bit the dust. This is an echo of Genesis. This is a horizon where the widescreen reading that we have promoted for Romans is certainly worth including here. That there will be enmity between humans and the serpent's head will be crushed. The serpent's food shall be the dust. Shall be dust, and Isaiah has picked that up in this vision of a world that was wronged, or that a world that into which wrong came, sin came, and here it has been set right. And these texts are key texts for that vision. The last verse in Isaiah 11, 1-10, and it will happen on that day, toward the root of Jesse, which stands there like a signal for the nations will all turn inquisitively, and his resting place shall be glorious. And my picture for this is that God has sent a revealer to the world, and the revealer will be seen in the world. And he will be perceived as the solution to the world's needs. They will turn to him inquisitively with our questions. Summing up, and one more verse to close off our course. The root of Jesse is a mediator of revelation. That I think we can say. Because a world that is filled with the knowledge of the Lord, that kind of world, knowledge of the Lord, someone has to talk to you, someone has to reveal things to you. A world filled with the knowledge of the Lord is possible because God sent a revealer to the world. Isaiah projects a vision of inclusion, the inclusion of the Gentiles explicit at the point of the vision's culmination. And will you agree with me that the vision is ecological? It restores harmony between humans and non-humans, and harmony between non-humans previously hostile to each other or afraid of one another, the lion and the lamb. So that is clear. We can say that for sure. And then, as a last point here, so he says that there is going to be, this revelation is going to be like a banner, a rallying point. He will stand as a signal to the nations. It's a banner, a rallying point, a signal to which the nations will turn inquisitively. And what does that say about how God brings healing to the nations? Revelation that is in itself intrinsically attractive, to sort of inspire confidence that this revealer might have what we need. And I showed my class this illustration last time. That is the lighthouse, the revelation shining in a darkened world, according to Isaiah 11. Okay, Paul has one more Old Testament quotation. And this one is also from Isaiah. It opens up a big horizon. We'll only see a glimpse of it here. I just want that to be the closing word in Romans. Thus I make it my ambition to proclaim the good news, not where Christ has already been named, so that I do not build on someone else's foundation, but as it is written in Isaiah, of course. Those who have never been told of him shall see, and those who have never heard of him shall understand. And here in Isaiah is the quotation, and this is the fourth of the servant songs in Isaiah, the fourth and the most important of the servant songs in Isaiah. Here echoes, or here is quoted at the very end of the letter to the Romans. Let me read the Isaiah statement. He shall startle many nations. Kings shall shut their mouths because of him. For that which had not been told them, they shall see. And that which they had not heard, they shall contemplate. I think I have made a pretty good case here to say that revelation is a key concept in the Bible and in the letter to the Romans and in the texts that echo at the end of Romans here. Let me just emphasize these. Those who have not that, here is the text quoted, and here is the text in its original setting. And you can see that the wording is very, very similar. So, just one couple of things by way of recapping. I make it my ambition to preach the gospel where it has not been preached. Paul says that, and it works also as a contrast to the counter-missionaries. Unlike the counter-missionaries who build on his foundation, who are not pioneer missionaries. And we said at the beginning of the course that Paul wrote to the Romans because he needed to counter the influence of the counter-missionaries. And then here that there is a revelation. And again we ask, was God angry with the world, or has God seemed to be absent from the world? Was it the angry God or the compassionate God? Well, the ending of Romans is all about compassion and not about anger. And then the third one is it faith in Christ? It is that too. Or is it the faithfulness of Christ? It is certainly that. At the beginning of Romans and at the ending. And I will now, for the last time, read this text. And that will be my closing text from Paul's letter to the Romans. And again Isaiah says, the root of Jesse shall come, the one who rises to shepherd the Gentiles. On him the Gentiles shall fix their hope. I should let you see the whole thing. On him the Gentiles shall fix their hope, and non-human creatures will also fix their hopes on him. We shall need him to have hope.